I'm Candid Frank. He's Aaron William Freeland. Little technical difficulty here, buddy. Our intro didn't go. I wonder if we still have it. I think it's here somewhere. No, I guess on the new app it isn't there. Oh well, that's the way it goes. Okay, he's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Station. We're here to talk Maple Leaf, and that would be Maple Leaf teams, Maple Leaf players, and that would be Canadian to say the least.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us, and we'll start right away. And the leaf management tree has been trimmed a little bit.
Yep, the branches are now just a little bit shorter. It'll be interesting to see what this brings for the Maple Leafs, in particular because of the fact that they got rid of their cap genius, Brandon Pridham. That is just one of the changes. The other was that the assistant general manager for player personnel, Clancey, is also out of his position. Now, these are just a couple of them that they've made following the firing of Berube. Toronto went from Atlantic Division champs in 2025 to last this season. This is part of the reason for the change. It'll be interesting to see how all of this now fits together because they're missing their resident capologist. Hopefully, they'll be able to get it together in time for silly season, which starts in another month and a bit, so that they won't be too negatively affected by the goings on around free agencies.
The GM is a self-proclaimed specialist in statistics. Now the cap is based on statistics, numbers at least anyway,
Yep.
and how you add them, how they work under the cap space you're allowed to have. There are certain things. The reason why the Leafs Pridham was such an attractive hire when he was hired was he was one of the members, one of the employees at the National Hockey League that invented the cap and started it. So they kind of thought they had a guy who was on the inside track, who understood it better than anyone or as good as anyone. And now he's not necessary anymore. And I wonder, Aaron, how much of these firings were part of the inducement of Maple Leaf upper management in hiring Chayka, getting a lot of these. Remember the comment at the press conference? There sure are a lot of assistant GMs on this team.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things where it's finally sort of come around again. The other interesting thing that we're working with here as well is John originally helped found a website called Stathletes with his sister Megan Chayka, who a lot of people said was the real brains behind it. But Megan was the one who was working as a financial analyst at the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario and as an analyst at John Deere before shifting focus to sports analysis, in the mid-2010s. She's actually the data scientist in residence at the Rotman School of Management at U of T, which is a position that she's held since 2017. She and a friend, Neil Lane, actually began filming John's games when he was playing junior ice hockey in the OJHL, with the aim of analyzing and collecting data to help him improve his game. This sort of morphed into Stathletes, which Chayka leveraged in his first go around with the Phoenix Coyotes. And I'm not sure if he considers his role as the data provider is what he considers to be his claim to excellence, or if it's his association with his sister and her, let's be honest here, absolutely amazing knowledge of when it comes to hockey statistics. So Megan's done a lot for this, and I'd like to think that some of that has bled over to John to enable him to do his job better.
Here's what Maple Leaf fans can hope. This is just me extrapolating a couple of facts, experiences. When the Toronto Blue Jays first brought on their statistical side of putting a team together, they went through a playoff and lost. And the reputation of the statistic decision, the data decision that took out a pitcher in a game that he was rolling and the Jays ended up losing, was a failure of the data way to do things in many people's minds. Now, having said that you could compare to what happened in Phoenix with Chayka. Now what Leaf fans have to hope is what the Blue Jays benefited from, which was the patience of dealing with data to put together a team and how to implement them and how to use them and even place them in the field. Now with the Maple Leafs, that's basically, as we know, the president said that at the meeting. That's the way teams are run nowadays, right? And I think since Rogers owns the Leafs now without any assistance from TSN or Bell, the system they have in place that brought them to the World Series last year is one that possibly could replicate within the National Hockey League's Toronto Maple Leafs, the team that Rogers owns. And now they're on their own making these decisions. Aaron, does anything I just said make any sense whatsoever?
It does track after a fashion. I believe that it would be to the Leafs' advantage to continue to look at the decisions that were made by Rogers with regard to the Toronto Blue Jays to improve their overall use of statistics. Certainly, there were definitely lessons that were learned, you can say, with almost 100% certainty with regards to that playoff loss and pulling that particular pitcher at the time that they did. And again, the hope is here that business is going to learn from that. And I'm inclined to believe, because most of the people at Rogers aren't idiots, some, but not all. And the ability to make a good decision is not beyond their ken. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I will also add this, and that is the advantage of being a big corporation allows you to have the wherewithal to do things that other owners that aren't big companies can't do. And add to that, if you have a professional franchise here and a professional franchise here and a professional franchise here, redundancy can be very profitable and or usable and be an advantage. So a lot of the applications that are made in our minds, and I say our minds, I shouldn't speak for you, in my mind, that has helped to make the Blue Jays a successful team is basically a legend or a pattern to what they hope to replicate in the Maple Leafs, in hoping that it has the same result. So the advantage also of having professional teams, multiple professional teams, investing in this kind of thinking, you get more bang for your buck because it goes across different teams. So you're reusing the plan you paid for. And if it's successful, the hope is that template can be repeated and the Leafs can be in a Stanley Cup. Now, that's left to be seen, right? We all know that. But it also, I think, is part of the reason why these people are getting fired, because they do not fit in, to the system that they want to apply. If you remember correctly, the president of the Toronto Blue Jays was also the general manager. And the general manager was actually an assistant general manager. Well, the assistant general manager has become the manager. They were a small group, a management team, about 2 people strong. So it's not the numbers that matter, aren't the contracts or the assignments or the assigned people for positions. It's actually the data that drives what's going on. It's a perfect example of, I'm not trying to get into the outside world of sports, but in essence, this is what people are fearing with AI entering into the world sphere of work and employment. So that's what this is, less is more, and rely more on AI than you do on people. So this is what is the question. And finally, what I'll say to this after all that, which is great, there still has to be a human touch because the game involves humans.
Now, and that's the one important thing that I think everybody needs to remember about all of this is that when it comes to AI, the decisions that the AI makes are only as good as the data you feed it. So if the data that you're feeding it is flawed or biased or influenced by the people who are inputting the data, that's going to change everything. And you have to be very, very careful when dealing with that sort of thing.
And also, I might suggest, without knowing how it works very well, how you read it could be also a way of, failing or succeeding.
No, definitely. And feeding information into AI to get the results that you want isn't necessarily the best use of AI.
Right. So there is a challenge here, and the challenge right now is, for now at least, this Leaf management team is shrinking, and we'll see to what extent it shrinks, and if new people are brought in, like let's say Cheka's sister, maybe no, as a
Now,
consultant.
Megan, I think, has her own plate full with the other stuff that she's doing. With her position at UT, her position within the PWHL, I don't think she'd be interested in this sort of thing at all.
Well, we'll find out. I don't know how she gets along with her brother, but I know if brother and sister get along, I mean, sure, there's a phone call with conversations about handling certain situations. If what you're saying is accurate, and I'm not saying it isn't, that she's the brains behind.
Well, the Leafs would have to pay staffletes in the same way as anybody else would have to pay staffletes. If they were to get the information for free, that could potentially be a conflict of interest, but I don't think either of them wants. So,
but anyway, that's it's just me saying that there are options out there, and I'm 100%. Curious as to what the options are that they'll take. All right, let's talk about players coming to Toronto, because that's something that we all believe is going to happen. This team should look a bit different than it did last year. A player that's come across the horizon of interest to the Toronto Maple Leafs, we hear, is Trocheck.
Yeah, the 32-year-old forward was heavily rumored to be traded as the Rangers' playoffs chances continued to plummet, and the team looked to retool the roster with the goal of getting younger. He was held out of the lineup on March 5th due to a roster management-related reason in the Rangers' last game ahead of the trade deadline, indicating that a deal involving Trocheck was potentially there. But once the deadline was over, it was just like, maybe we can relax a little bit on this more now that we're entering the off season, and now that you have an opportunity to look at how your team could look with the newer higher cap. It's certainly something else that they'd be looking to explore. He's on the wrong side of his career. I don't want to be mean here, but he's over 30. That's generally considered the downside of your career.
And someone you would add to help you get over the hump.
Exactly. But right with this Leafs team, it doesn't look like
the Leafs are trying to get to the hump.
Exactly. They're nowhere near the hump at this point. So adding Vinny would be, I don't know, it would seem to be slightly counterproductive.
Well, it would be basically getting a part you're not sure, and you're beginning a repair on your engine. You're not sure what's wrong, but buying a part on the assumption that that's what you need.
No. I could need this for later.
It could be. Yeah. So I say this is a waste of money, a waste of assets, a waste of energy. What they really have to do, what the Leafs have to do, is get younger and better. And the better part requires every asset they have being maximized. And we've talked about it in the past. We've talked about the strength in goaltending, unless you're watching the USA team at the World Championships and watching Wall get taken out. 5 goals in, 10 shots or something?
5 goals and 9 shots. First 2 shots of the second period is just, oof. Doesn't look good for him. But then again, it's funny how quickly the shine of their gold medal seems to have tarnished. Especially with the performance that they're putting on here at another supposed best-on-best tournament after winning gold at the Olympics. It kind of makes you wonder if they understand where the priorities genuinely lie when it comes to hockey. Or good every 4 years is different than being good every year.
Well, or the competitive nature of each event, right? I mean, let's be honest about one thing: the World Championships, the Olympics, World Championships, Olympics.
Yeah, fair.
To have won the Olympics and then take part in this, and the players that are taking part in it aren't necessarily the same ones that were at the Olympics. And I truly believe that the American team was lucky to beat Canada. I watched the game. My eyes, I don't have lion eyes. They showed me that Canada, an inch here, an inch there, could have won that game very easily before overtime. So in my opinion, they're just playing at the level that they are. And look at Denmark. I watched that game, and I'm watching Canada play Denmark, a far superior team. But in the first 2 periods, they were nothing until finally, Canada broke it open, and good for them. I think they won 4-1. I think the score was, and that was good. That was good for them. And we saw 2 Leafs there playing We saw two of the veterans that the Leafs have. They looked okay. Tavares scored in his first shift, I guess, well, not first shift, but in the first game. So the Leafs have some players that are trying to, reacquaint themselves with winning. Wall, a little more difficult. He's going to need more time.
Yeah, it was a shellacking. It was not pretty. Now, the other good news that the Leafs have coming out of all of this, well, maybe not necessarily good news, but Berube has Leafs have actually given permission to the Edmonton Oilers to speak to Craig Berube. He does have 2 more years on his contract
And
with
does
the
he
Leafs.
work? Does he? What the good news, to your point, would be if those 2 years are erased if he's hired by somebody else.
That's the fingers crossed part,
right? Yeah. That's the part you're absolutely. I totally agree. Let's go to the PWHL and let's bring back the coaches challenge after a season of slow reviews.
Well, officiating is at the center of the success of their on-ice product. And I'll be honest with you, in the first 2 games of the best-of-5 playoffs that they've had so far for the Cup, the officiating has not looked good. It has looked very sketchy. Some blatant calls were actually missed. In particular, one of the game-winning goals that the Victoire scored, their defenseman was tripped right before that play actually happened, and no call was made by the referees. So it's one of those situations where they took away the coach's challenge. They took away the penalty associated with the coach's challenge. They said that all reviews are going to be referee initiated. And the problem with that is that no referee wants to admit that they might have made a mistake. No referee wants to call for a review on a penalty call that they made because it could potentially be wrong. And on top of that, the PWHL actually fired almost all of their video staff because they were pushing for higher pay. And the reason they were pushing for higher pay is because if you're going to do more reviews, then that's more work for us, and we should get paid more for it. But yeah, they said, nah, we're going to keep going with what we've got, and we're not going to listen to you guys. So,
wow,
it's bad. It was really, really bad.
I remember a couple of years ago with Toronto against Tampa, the same thing happened where a Leaf defenseman was along the blue line, and then he got grabbed and dropped to the ice, and then they ended up with a 2-on-1 because the defenseman was taken down. So, my point is that bad officiating doesn't begin and end in the PWHL.
No, I mean, bad officiating is everywhere, but for a league that says that they're trying to make it a cornerstone of their model and what they do, it's counterintuitive,
Well, bad officiating is when you notice the mistakes. At the end of the day, to expect officials not to make any mistakes is a little too high on the end of expectation. But you don't want the mistakes to be noticeable and worse of all, game changing. And that's the concern that you're alluding to, and that's what the PWHL needs to revisit. They have to figure out if they're going to be a league that has, really good officiating. In other words, the games are well officiated. Then it doesn't look like a bush league, right? Which is what you're trying not to look like, right? So it's important that they iron out the issues they have with calling penalties and iron out the issues with the replay situation. And I suppose, Aaron, here's the problem. You have X amount of money. Now, how do you spread it around, right? And unfortunately, we notice in life, we learned from the pandemic that people that we pay minimum wage are more necessary than some we pay more. So I'm just laying that out there as an example for the PWHL to consider. The value of employees needs to be considered. And to just suddenly go, okay, we're just going to fire everybody. To me, that didn't seem like a very good plan to begin with, in my opinion.
No.
Let's talk about Manon Rhéaume. You may or may not remember her, folks, but she was the first goalie to play for a National Hockey League team. Was exhibition, but still, she was in goal for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yep, way back in the day. She has now been announced as the general manager of PWHL Detroit, which is awesome. Jana Hefford announced it, saying she's a pioneer whose impact on the game extends far beyond the ice. She brings an unmatched hockey resume, a championship mindset, and a lifelong commitment to growing the women's game. as it currently stands. She was the LC AAA Girls Division Director. She's leveraged her hockey experience to provide unparalleled mentorship, development, and leadership for Detroit's next generation of elite athletes. So I'm very happy for her to be moving on in that regard. There's also a couple of other teams out there. Another one is Las Vegas. Dominique Didia is going to be the one who's the general manager there. She's going to be joining the PWHL, coming direct from CAA Sports, where she launched the agency's women's hockey department and served as co-head of the division, working with professional and amateur women's hockey athletes on representation, marketing, and career development. So this is an important step for them as well. She joined the CAA Sports in 2022 as a marketing exec in the hockey department, working with professional athletes across the NHL and women's hockey landscape, including being a certified agent for PWHL players following the league's launch. So it's a natural fit for her to move from CAA to the general manager of Las Vegas. No news out of Hamilton as to who's going to be the general manager there, but once we have news, we'll keep you posted.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch over to hockey in the AHL. And of course, the Leaf fans are very interested in this. Their team is playing the Cleveland Monsters. The Monsters winning game 2. Aaron, is there anywhere, before you talk about this, is there anywhere for us to watch it without having to get a subscription?
Unfortunately, the only ways that are available to watch it right now is through flowhockey.com. I was hoping that the games would have been on TSN, but I haven't seen anything as yet.
Even Rogers.
You'd think they'd be willing and interested in promoting their own team, but because it's an AHL team, it does sort of fall outside of their bailiwick because they don't own the AHL, and they have their own set of broadcast rights and rules that they have to deal with.
Absolutely.
Now, Cleveland jumped out to a 2-0 lead for the second game in a row. However, unlike the first game that they lost 5-2, they didn't actually manage to the Marlies, didn't actually manage to come back. The teams are coming back to Toronto for Game 3 on Wednesday. Roman Akan and Michael Payesha scored during the first period, in which Cleveland owned a 13-4 advantage in shots on goal. Gru scored a shorthanded goal to cut the deficit to 2-1 with 4:28 left in the second. But Luca Pinelli with the Monsters got an insurance goal at 7:06 to go in regulation to seal the win. Will Butcher had 2 assists, and Zach Sawchenko made 17 saves for Cleveland, and Artur Akhtarimov got 21 shots for the Marlies. So next game up is going to be Wednesday at 7. Game after that, I'll be at that game on Wednesday, unfortunately, which means I won't be doing the show with you, Frank. And then Friday, May 22nd, if necessary, it will be, is going to be Game 4. Game 5, if required, goes Sunday, May 24th, in Cleveland at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Wednesday. Isn't that the first game? That's the first game of the Western Conference final on Wednesday.
Yes.
So harder if the next game was Tuesday, it would have been better because there would have been no hockey on, and then maybe the temptation to bring it on would have been there. Yeah, interesting situation. Leaf fans would a lot of people would watch that just basically on them being the Leaf franchise in that playoff series in the AHL. Let's talk about the Jays, and hallelujah, Junior gets a home run. Not a deep one. Made it over the fence into the bullpen, but it made it over the fence.
Yeah, he'd been suffering. At one point, he'd gone, I think, 3 of 51 at the plate, which was not a position you want to be in. But his homer and the fact that he crossed the plate twice, along with Kevin Gausman pitching 6 shutout innings, and the Blue Jays managed to beat the Tigers 4-1 on Sunday. Now, this was just his 3rd this season and his 10th extra base hit in 46 games so far. Gausman limited the Tigers to 4 hits without a walk and struck out 5. He gave up a season-high 7 runs, 6 earned, and 10 hits and 4 2/3 against Tampa Bay on Monday. So thank goodness there was a bit of a turnaround for that. And Tyler Rogers got 3 outs for his first save since 2024. Varsho finally got a couple of extra base hits. They capped a productive 4-game stretch for him. He had a walk-off grand slam against the Rays on Wednesday and knocked in the winning run with a 10th-inning single on Saturday. The Blue Jays took 2 of 3 games over the weekend, just their second series victory on the road. The Tigers have lost 10 of their last 12 games. So they're in a little bit better of a position, but not necessarily where they want to be.
Absolutely. Let's go to the Canadian Football League, and let's talk about Oh wait, sorry. Let's finish with the Blue Jays. Eric Lauer, his time with the Blue Jays is over.
Yeah, he was DFA'd, but then he's now being traded. You'll never guess. Sorry, he's been claimed off waivers. I do apologize. He was claimed by the Los Angeles Dodgers, which is interesting enough. They picked him up after the Blue Jays DFA'd him. Lauer had a 6.69 ERA this season, so on paper he didn't seem that desirable. He had a 3.18 ERA last season, but that was an outlier from his regular career productions, so it wasn't clear that it would continue this season anyways. So the Dodgers will either be sending cash or a player to be named later to Toronto for Lauer. It's mostly a procedural move to complete the waiver claim after the designation for assignment. So. Now, back in the CFL, the Elks have signed a global kicker. He's Jesus Gomez. Gomez is 6'2", 215. He joined the Elks after being selected in the first round in the 2026 CFL Global Draft. He's originally from Puebla, Mexico. Spent last season at Arizona State, but had attended Eastern Michigan for 4 seasons between 21 and 2025. He connected on 68 of 88 field goal attempts. That's a 77.3% ratio, and 128 of 133 point after attempts, or 96.2%. Good pickup for them.
Absolutely. How about the Ticats?
Well, they've signed American defensive back Gavin Gibson. Gibson played 12 games at the University of North Carolina in 25, recording 38 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. He looks to be a good addition to their line. It's something that I think that they missed was the ability to get penetration off the snap. So it'll be good to see how he fits in there. In addition to that, the Ticats also signed Matthew Schultz to a 1-day contract that would allow him to retire as a Ticat. He spent 2 seasons with the Ticats in 2023 and 2022. Played in 28 games, completed 193 of 280 pass attempts for 11 touchdowns. He said, Hamilton's felt like his second home. Coming here, it's where I really felt I settled down as a player and as a man. There was something different about this place and something different about playing in front of the fans that always stuck with me. So he said, he's retiring officially as a Ticat, which is good.
Argos sign a defensive back in Alex Tubner.
So Tubner most recently spent time with the BC Lions after playing at Boise State between 2020 and 2024. He had 195 tackles, 2 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries in 52 games for the Broncos. He was a 2-time honorable mention All-Mountain West MVP in 23 and 24, as well as a Mountain West Championship Defensive MVP in 2024. The team also announced the release of American receiver A.J. Smith at that time, so we'll have to see how Alex fits in.
Let's talk about hockey, and let's talk about the Habs and how they squandered their shot to eliminate the Sabres at home.
Yeah, it was an 8-3 thumping against the Sabres on Saturday night. They had multi-goal advantages at home. It's confusing as to how that happened, but it just looked like Buffalo was more determined. They were up 3-1 in the first and lost 8-3, so that's disappointing for sure. It's probably one of the worst games they've played in the playoffs. Rasmus Dahlin had a goal and 4 assists, tying a franchise playoff record with 5 points, as the Sabres came back after swapping goalies to even the second-round playoff series at 3 games apiece. The line was pulled. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen stopped all 18 shots he faced. And Lyon gave up 3 goals on 4 shots, so you can understand why he was pulled as quickly as he was. But the fact that Buffalo seemed to be playing a lot more loose than Montreal was certainly contributed. And, as it happens with most elimination games, you tend to grip the stick just a little bit tighter. So,
is Reimer going to be a number 3 in Ottawa or a number 2? I know they want to keep him around, right?
Well, they do seem to want to run it back because it seems like the best backup plan that they could potentially have now. Linus Ullmark really carried the mail down the stretch. And he and the Senators turned the season around, but Reimer was one of the stabilizing forces behind it. They were asking Merrill Lyon at 23 to be a full-time NHL backup, and they're asking Ullmark to play more than 50 games, which is something he's never done. So it was an interesting situation that they found themselves in. At 38, Reimer gets the fact that he's going to be a backup, a perennial backup. So it could be the best option for them at this point, running him out as the 1C behind their 1A and 1B.
Yeah, he seems to like being involved, and even though the opportunities are less or not as many as he'd want, he's still involved in hockey, and that's a good thing for somebody who doesn't want to give it up just yet. It feels like they still have
has more to give,
right? So
yeah,
good for him. Let's talk about Jonathan Toews, another decision on an older veteran sticking around with the team.
Well, they need center help. I think it's fairly obvious at this point that one of their issues during the season was help at center. They are considering bringing back Jonathan Toews on a discounted deal. He's 38 years old now. They want to give him another shot at completing his story. It made headlines across the hockey world last summer when he signed with the Jets, because it's a hometown signing. That doesn't happen all that often, especially not in Winnipeg. The hope was that his championship pedigree and two-way game could help anchor the Jets down the middle. Now, the results, while modest on the score sheet, told a slightly more nuanced story. He finished the season with 30 points, numbers reminiscent of his final years in Chicago and not the production of a top six driver. But it was never really about the points. It was more about durability, character, and leading the young kids in the room. So for that reason alone, I can see them bringing him back for another season as well. Absolutely.
And then you've got the Flames that are, rumors has it that they might be tearing this thing down. I don't know if that's a good idea. They looked okay last year. It looked like they just needed a couple of pieces.
Well, the word is that they're looking to build something far more sustainable. For the better part of 2 seasons, Calgary's been in that most uncomfortable area of the middle ground. Not good, not bad enough to get a top 10 draft pick, but not good enough to make the playoffs. It's that precarious area. Even this year they managed to fall to 8th when it came to drafting. So there's that as well. The luck of the draw just seems to be against them. But with the emergence of Dustin Wolf, Matt Vigridden, Matt Coronado, and Zane Parekh elevating themselves, there certainly is more of a temptation there to try to get rid of some of the higher priced older forwards that they have and start bringing in newer talent. So I can understand the desire to tear it all down at this point. We'll just have to see which direction they decide to go in.
Not only did the Oilers ask permission to speak to the Leaf coach, they also made a bizarre signing.
Yeah, now this is something that happened last season. They signed 31-year-old goalie Matt Tompkins to a 2-year, two-way deal at $775 per year in the NHL and $400,000 in the AHL. At the time it was made, back on July 1st last year, it seemed like a smart sort of minor signing for the Oilers, but the Tompkins contract made no sense at the time, and it makes less sense now. It disrupts the development of goalies in the Oilers farm system, especially on the Bakersfield Condors, and threatens to do the same again this year because for that money, $400,000, he's expected to play in the AHL.
Absolutely.
But, it's not really all that surprising because Edmonton is a franchise that's kind of known for goalie issues, especially with Pickard and Skinner. And then when they picked up Jari and Connor Ingram, so questionable decisions when it comes to players that they've got in goal seem to be part and parcel for this team. I'd be interesting to see where Stan takes it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Canucks and their new GM and the limitations he has.
Well, again, it's one of those things where Ryan Johnson is the new general manager. He's being hailed as the new guy, but the problem that we have here is that the roster is going to be very difficult to construct because a lot of players have no movement clauses. Those players are Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, Jake DeBrusk, Philip Hronik, Marcus Pettersson, Kevin Lankinen, and Thatcher Demko. Those guys all have NMCs that kick in July 1st. Unless he can get something done in the next 6 weeks, this is going to be an absolutely hellish season for him because these guys you're not going to be able to shift them, and you may want to if you're going into a rebuild. And as much as we'd like to say that he'll have a little more control than he would have under Patrick Allvin, I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I had a discussion with one of our mutual friends about the National Hockey League, and he brought up the CFL, and I said, well, the CFL is not the same as the National Hockey League. You can rebuild a team so easily, multiple reasons, lots of reasons. You can list them, but at the top of the list is how many more players there are that play football in North America and how few teams there are, comparatively speaking, for how many football players there are. Also, the fact that you can get rid of a guy and not pay his contract. That's not something you can do in the National Hockey League. So in other words, you can make mistakes, but they're easily erased. And that's what you can't do in the National Hockey League. You're in this tiny little box that you have, that you sign contracts and you got to see them through. And on top of that, you have these no trade clauses that you don't have in the Canadian Football League like you have in the National Hockey League. And it makes a big difference in trying to redesign your team. Never mind tear it down to its roots. Just to redesign the team is a challenge, just to redesign it a little bit. So that GM has an experience that he's in for. But you know what, Aaron, when he took the job, he knew what was going on. And in the National
100%.
In the National Hockey League, as a general manager, it really is important that you make good moves and find players in ways that others do not, and compete with other teams and get players, those players, the few that can go, that are free to go places, to be able to get those that you need is more than your share. That's where the Leafs are. That's the bin they're looking at. They're looking at the bin where these guys are free agents, but they're young, and getting them on the team to fill their roster and or their coffers, and of course their minor league team. It's harder to do. So, it's a difficult situation. Tonight, the Montreal Canadiens shortly will be playing, of course, the Buffalo Sabres in Buffalo, just a few short miles from here. Aaron, what do you think is going to happen in that game tonight?
I just think that we're going to be seeing something that we haven't seen in a long time, and
Montreal
that is
score first. Montreal score first.
That could potentially be it. That could really potentially be it.
I mean, or not get scored on in the first 2 minutes.
That's that's the Leafs blueprint, is getting scored on in the first minute.
So,
We'll see how it goes.
That 8-3 game. I mean, I had to take a double take to make sure it was the Montreal Canadiens I was watching play, and it's ridiculous how ineffective their offense was in getting into the Buffalo zone. Hopefully in Buffalo, there's a little more pressure on the team that's at home in the playoffs. Now, that's not to say that they can't win because there's so much pressure, just more pressure. But they always have that. The coach has the opportunity to put his players that he thinks will be better against their players, and he has the final change to make sure that happens. So that's something that Buffalo's going to try and do. And the question is, can Montreal, after missing the opportunity, their first time playing on Hockey Night in Canada at night, their first game in the playoffs at that time, on that day, and at home, and what is it somebody used to say? They Schmidt the bed.
They certainly did.
Oh my goodness. Aaron, thanks for doing this, buddy. I'll see you Friday. Wednesday.
Not a problem, Frank. Take care.
Enjoy the hockey game on Wednesday.
Will do.
Send me a text telling me how it ends up so I won't have to look for it.
I'll keep you posted.
All right, please do. Thank you, Aaron. He's Aaron William
Frank.
Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. Thank you for watching, everybody. We'll see you again on Friday. Until then, have a great one, everybody. Enjoy the hockey game.